In the heart of London, what began as a simmering sense of frustration evolved into a massive and emotionally charged demonstration that swept across the city with a force few officials had anticipated. As tens of thousands of people poured into the streets to protest the government's handling of illegal immigration, turning Westminster into the centre of an unfolding political storm that would dominate the nation's attention for days. From the early hours of the morning, crowds gathered outside Parliament Square, holding signs and chanting slogans demanding accountability, transparency, and immediate structural reforms, with many insisting that Prime Minister Keir Starmer had lost control of the situation and betrayed the public's trust, prompting a growing number of citizens to call loudly and repeatedly for his resignation. The atmosphere felt electric, tense, and deeply emotional, with protesters representing communities across the capital, from East London to Croydon, from suburban families to students, from activists to frustrated business owners who claimed the unresolved immigration issues were affecting their livelihoods, pushing the political climate into unprecedented territory. As the protests swelled beyond initial estimates, police reinforcements were dispatched to manage the escalating crowd, and officers attempted to create controlled pathways to prevent bottlenecks. Though by midday, several critical areas, Whitehall, Trafalgar Square, and the bridges connecting both sides of the Thames, were overwhelmed with human congestion, amplifying fears that the situation could spiral out of hand. Despite the intention of most demonstrators to remain peaceful, tensions erupted near the Home Office when a cluster of protesters pushed past the barricades, sparking a chaotic scramble in which several individuals were detained after refusing police orders to step back. And in the midst of the confusion, one police officer suffered exhaustion-related complications and was transported to the hospital for precautionary evaluation, a development that further intensified public emotions, but, importantly, did not result in any severe harm or violence. By this time, news helicopters circled the skies, capturing the dramatic scope of the crowd, while national broadcasters provided rolling coverage, describing the protest as one of the largest anti-government mobilisations seen since Starmer assumed office. Political commentators from across the spectrum weighed in, with some claiming the protest reflected a deeper frustration that had been brewing within the British public for years, while others warned that the immigration debate had transformed into a lightning rod for broader dissatisfaction with the government's perceived lack of direction, inconsistent policy execution, and failure to communicate clearly with the public. As the pressure mounted, senior officials inside Downing Street were said to be scrambling, conducting urgent strategy meetings to assess the political damage and calculate whether Starmer needed to address the nation immediately to calm the rising anger. Meanwhile, the crowd continued to grow, stretching from Parliament to the Embankment, forming a sea of people waving banners that read, "Fix the crisis," "We deserve answers," "Enough is enough," and increasingly, "Starmer must go," a slogan that soon became the protest's defining chant. Emotional testimonies echoed through portable megaphones as demonstrators shared personal stories, including families worried about community safety, young workers struggling with economic instability, and long-time residents expressing fear that the government had lost control over immigration systems entirely. By late afternoon, the protest had transformed into a powerful display of collective frustration, with large groups staging sit-ins along government buildings, forcing transport officials to divert bus routes and temporarily close nearby tube stations due to overwhelming foot traffic. Although police maintained a firm presence, they repeatedly emphasised their intention to manage the protests safely without unnecessary confrontation, resulting in mostly controlled interactions aside from a few tense moments where isolated pockets of agitation broke out near Downing Street. The political implications of the protest were immediate, with opposition parties seizing the moment to criticise the Starmer administration's handling of immigration enforcement, border control negotiations, and community support programmes, suggesting that the day's events signalled a growing disconnect between the government and the public. As evening approached, the glow of thousands of phone cameras lit the streets as demonstrators continued live streaming, capturing chants that echoed through the narrow alleyways of Westminster and broadcast across social platforms, trending globally within hours. While the temperature dropped, the emotional temperature of the crowd did not, with some speakers calling not just for reform, but for a complete political reset, arguing that the crisis had become too large to manage under the current leadership. Analysts noted that the protest revealed deep fractures within the national conversation, fractures that had gone unaddressed for too long, and that Starmer now faced the most significant challenge of his premiership. As darkness settled, police encouraged dispersal for safety reasons, but many protesters refused to leave, staging an overnight demonstration near Parliament Square, lighting candles and holding long banners that stretched across the pavement, symbolising the urgency of their demands. Government insiders anonymously suggested that the Prime Minister was facing unprecedented internal pressure, with several advisers urging him to deliver an emergency address to reassure the public, while others feared that any misstep, any poorly delivered statement or miscalculated promise, could inflame the situation further. By late night, the scale of the protest had begun to ease, though pockets of demonstrators remained, guarding symbolic positions near government buildings and promising to return in even greater numbers if their concerns continued to go unheard. Throughout the city, cleanup crews worked to clear debris from the day's demonstration, even as political analysts predicted that this would not be a short-lived event, but the beginning of a sustained national movement that could shape the UK's political landscape for years. In the days following, media outlets published extensive analyses, showing that public confidence in Starmer had sharply declined, with commentators warning that unless he delivered bold, concrete action, and soon, the calls for his resignation would intensify beyond the symbolic chants heard during the protest. Meanwhile, activists who had organised the demonstration announced future marches, insisting that the government must confront the concerns of citizens rather than dismiss them as political noise. Though the immediate turmoil subsided, London remained on edge, with a palpable sense that the nation stood on the brink of major political transformation, as debates about immigration, leadership, and public trust continued to dominate every newspaper, broadcast, and online discussion, leaving the fate of Keir Starmer's government and its ability to weather the storm uncertain as pressure mounted from every direction.